and we are going to go into our lecture. All right, so we are doing network security appliances and technologies tonight. So security appliances. Security can be achieved through appliances that directly address security and by using the security features in standard networking devices. Using both standard networking devices and security appliances can result in a layered security approach. Appliances include firewalls, proxy servers, deception instruments, intrusion detection and prevention systems, and network hardware security models. First off, we'll do firewalls. To use firewalls effectively, you must understand that function of firewalls and know the different types of firewalls and specialized firewall appliances. Firewall functions. Firewall uses a bidirectional inspection to examine outgoing and incoming packets. The actions are based on specific criteria or rules called rule-based firewalls. A more flexible type of firewall is a policy-based firewall. Thanks so much for the help there, Kat. Which allows more generic statements instead of specific rules. Firewalls can also apply content URL filtering. So this is an example of a URL, a content filtering one. Firewall categories, there's stateful versus stateless, open source versus proprietary, hardware versus software, and host versus appliance versus virtual. This is what a Windows host-based firewall looks like. I'm pretty sure all of you have seen that because they pop up, those little screens pop up frequently. This is an example of where a firewall, like an appliance-based firewall, is placed. It's usually placed between the routers and the switches. Then there's, they go over specialized firewall appliances. So web application firewalls, network address translation gateway, or NAT, is a technique used that allows private IP addresses to be used on the public internet. Basically, the reason they used NAT was to allow because we started running out of IP addresses, it allows us to basically recycle some of that and allows us more of those to have available. There's next generation firewalls, and then there's UTM, or Unified Threat Management. UTM is a device that combines several security functions such as packet filtering, anti-spam, anti-phishing, anti-spyware, encryption, intrusion protection, and web filtering. This is one of those ones that's kind of like your security suites. It just has everything crammed into the same space. Proxy servers. Okay, proxies are devices that act as substitutes on behalf of the primary device. A forward proxy is a computer or an application that intercepts user requests from the internal secure network and processes the requests on behalf of the user. A reverse proxy routes requests coming from an external network to the correct internal server. A proxy server can provide a degree of protection. It can look for malware by intercepting it before it reaches the internal endpoint. It can hide the IP address of endpoints inside the secure network so that only the proxy server's IP address is used on the open internet. And this is just a nice little graphic that shows your forward proxy and reverse proxy and what that looks like. Deception instruments. Honestly, it sounds like something out of Harry Potter, but deception can be used as security defense by directing threat actors away from valuable assets to something that has little or no valuable. Network deception can involve creating and using honeypots and sinkholes. Honeypots are a computer located in an area with limited security that serves as bait to threat actors. Two goals of using that are to deflect and discover. Yeah, exactly. It does kind of sound like one of those spells. That's what it sounded like to me. Or one of the introduction to the dark arts classes. So this is what an example of a honeypot dashboard looks like. Basically, you just make something that looks enticing to your attacker, and they go after that instead of an actual valuable thing. And the nice thing about that is, A, they're not attacking your real assets, and B, when they're attacking this, you can watch them and their behaviors, and you can see, oh, okay, so that's what they would do. So there are some other different types of that. There's the low interaction, which can only do, which can have things like a login prompt, and that's it. And then there's what's called a high interaction, and this is designed for capturing more information, like I was talking about. This type can collect information from threat actors about like their attack techniques or particular information they're seeking from the organization. So that way you can update your risk assessments and say, hey, this is what they're actually looking for. A honey net is basically it's a network of honeypots set up with intentional vulnerabilities. So you can be like, hey, look at this right here. This is much more interesting than the actual network. And you can just set them that direction. Sinkholes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Pretty much everyone here is old enough to have seen a Bond movie. I'm
I
pretty
hope
sure
so.
we all understand what a honeypot is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope so, because then if you've watched that, then you will understand that they named those after the old James Bond movies and spies stuff. So sinkholes, these are basically a bottomless pit designed to steer unwanted traffic away from their intended destination to another device. So the goal is to deceive the threat actor into thinking the attack was successful. Basically, you send them in there and they never get out. And they think, oh, okay, I got all of this cool stuff or whatever. And it's just a pile of crap, basically. Intrusion detection and prevention systems. So we've talked about these a couple of times. So IDS and IPS. So the detection and prevention, or the P and the D and P. Inline systems. An inline system is connected directly to the network and monitors the flow of data as it occurs. A passive system is connected to a port on a switch, which receives a copy of the network traffic. IDS systems can be managed in different ways. Thank you so much, Katz. Yeah, I just set it over there. In-band management is through the network itself by using network protocols and tools. And then there's out-of-band management, which uses independent and dedicated channels to reach the device. Monitoring methodologies. We've talked a little bit about these before. Anomaly-based monitoring, which compares current detected behavior with your baseline. Signature, which looks for known attack signatures, which can be a problem because if it's something that's never been seen, then you're not going to know which one it is. There's behavior-based monitoring, which detects abnormal actions by processes or programs. This alerts users who decide whether to allow or block the activity. So it's like, hey, this looks kind of hinky. Are you sure you want this to happen? Heuristic monitoring. This uses experience-based techniques and attempts to answer the question, will this do something harmful if it's allowed to execute? And this is where they start using things like your machine-based learning.
I had a question for the behavior base. Could it be used? Well, I get that it monitors the behavior of the systems and the programs, but whenever I think of it, I always think of the human factor first. And is there one that monitors the behavior of, so say, someone all of a sudden starts sending way more, not necessarily trying to DDoS the attack or DDoS the servers or anything, but someone just starts sending way more stuff than they would, not necessarily.
Yes, there are ones that these can be set with varying levels of severity, and you can get ones that allow you to set things like limits that say, okay, if the user is over a certain amount of traffic, or like they have a whole bunch of incorrect login attempts, which is a very common one, or there's all sorts of different triggers that you can set, because they do that because sometimes you got to look for those insider threats that we talked about, but also, you got to look for those, okay, what happens if this person's credentials get stolen or they have something like that happen? So yeah, that's a good point. Yes, the behavior-based ones can be used to detect things like that. Do we have any other questions on those? Does that answer your question too?
Good for me.
Okay. Okay. A network intrusion detection system, your NIDS, watches for attacks on the network. NIDS sensors are installed in a firewall and router and gather information and report back to their central devices. A network intrusion prevention system monitors and detects malicious activities, and then it also attempts to stop them. So there are network hardware and security modules as well. Hardware security module is a removable external cryptographic device. For endpoints, an HSM is typically like a USB device, an expansion card, or sometimes they're another device that connects through a port. Network hardware security module performs cryptographic operations such as key management, key exchange, onboard random number generation, key storage facility, and accelerated symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So they have kind of a more robust encryption option than you would normally get. Configuration management. So we've talked about this quite a bit. It's essential that security appliances be properly configured. Basic configuration management tools include secure baseline configuration, standard naming conventions, defined Internet Protocol schema, and diagrams. Okay, knowledge check. Which of the following network security devices is a computer that is purposely located in an area with limited security to attract threat actors? Forward proxy honeypot inline system behavior monitor. Bond, James Bond. Yes, very nice. Okay, security technologies. So there are general security technologies that can provide defense. Some of these can be found in both standard networking devices like switches and routers and specialized security appliances. Categories of security technologies include access technology, monitoring and management technologies, and design technologies. Access Control List, or ACL. This contains rules that administer the availability of digital assets by granting or denying access to the assets. Two types of ACLs include file system ACLs, which filter access to files and directories on an endpoint by telling the operating system who can access the device and what privileges they are allowed. Networking ACLs, which filter access to a network. These are often found on your routers. Router ACLs can be used on external routers to restrict vulnerable protocols and limit traffic from entering the network. Internal router ACLs are often configured with explicit allow and deny statements for specific addresses and protocol services.
So would an ACL be a whitelist?
Yes and no. It's not technically a whitelist because it also has stuff that you would see on a block list too.
Okay, so it's a German list, good and bad.
Yes, exactly. VPNs. A VPN is a secure technology that enables authorized users to use an unsecured public network as if it were a secure private network. So there's two common ones. There's a remote access VPN and a site-to-site VPN. A full tunnel sends all traffic to the VPN concentrator and protects it. A split tunnel routes only some traffic over the secure VPN, while other traffic directly accesses the internet, and that helps with your bandwidth issues. The most common protocols used for VPNs are IPsec and SSL. Network access control, or NAC, examines the current state of a system or a network device before it can connect to the network. Any device that does not meet the specified set of criteria can connect only to a quarantined network where the security deficiencies are corrected. NAC users often uses software agents to gather information and report back, called host agent health checks. An agent may be permanent NAC agent or a dissolvable NAC agent that disappears after reporting information to the NAC. The NAC technology can be embedded within a Microsoft Windows Active Directory, AD, domain controller. NAC uses AD to scan the device, which is called agentless NAC. So this is just your nice breakout of what you have here. So you see number one starts out here. So self-assessment by system health, to statement of health to health registration authority. And you see that go out here, and you have your health certificate, and then it presents back to the network. And then if no health certificate, you got your little quarantine network it's talking about. Data loss prevention. Now, this has become a big part of, it's actually kind of its own, developing into its own section of cybersecurity. Data loss prevention is, or DLP, is considered as rights management or the authority of the owner of the data to impose restrictions on its use. DLP is a system of security tools that is used to recognize and identify data that's critical to the organization. Most DLP systems use content inspection, which is defined as security analysis of the transaction within its approved context. An administrator creates DLP rules based on the data and the policy. These rules are loaded into a DLP server. When a policy violation is detected by the DLP agent, it is reported back to the DLP server. When the server is notified of a policy violation, different actions can be taken. You can block the data, you can redirect it to an individual who can examine the request, you can quarantine it until later, or you can alert a supervisor of the request. A process called tokenization obfuscates sensitive data elements, such as an account number, into random string of characters or token. The original sensitive data element and the token are stored in a database called a token vault, so that if the actual data element is needed, it can be retrieved as needed. Tokenization, it looks like we've got a nice, there you go. Here's your example of what it looks like. So if someone is an idiot and actually puts social security numbers and account numbers in like an email, and I've seen this actually work within emails, and there are certain plugins that you can use if you're using like email filters and stuff, and you can, it'll catch it, put it in quarantine, and depending on how you set the rules, and then with this data tokenization, it actually changes those values to something else. So that's always nice, because then you don't get sued for releasing information like this. Now, technologies for monitoring and managing. There's port security, which threat actors who access a network device through an unprotected port can reconfigure the device to their advantage. Route security is the trust of packets sent through a router. A false route information can be injected or altered by weak port security. Broadcast storm prevention can be accomplished by loop prevention. Loop prevention uses IEEE 8021D standard spanning tree protocol. I don't expect you to remember that. That's one of those things that it's good to know where to find it. STP uses an algorithm that creates a hierarchical tree layout that spans the entire network. So here's your example of what a broadcast storm looks like. Packet capture and analysis. Analyzing packets helps to monitor network performance and reveal cybersecurity incidents. Monitoring traffic on switches can be done in two ways. A separate port tap, which is a test access point, can be installed, or you can do what's called port mirroring or port spanning, which allows the administrator to configure the switch to copy traffic to some or all ports to a designated monitoring port on the switch. There's also monitoring services. An external third-party monitoring service can be used to provide additional resources to assist an organization in cybersecurity defenses. Now, depending on how much data you have and how many staff you have, sometimes you'll get a lot of third-party monitoring options if you don't have a huge IT department, or they'll do kind of like a half and half deal. They'll do the capture and analysis or port mirroring on the important appliances and then like shift over for the less important on third party, or sometimes they'll shift depending on their security stance. And here's an example of what a port tap looks like. And this one's port mirroring. File integrity monitors examine files to see if they have changed. Now, this one's actually really cool if you ever get to see it in action. So the monitors are used for detecting malware as well as maintaining compliance with industry specific regulations. So do you remember us talking about the SHA values? How it had like the files when you go on certain sites had different SHA values that you could go, okay, yes, this file has good and it hasn't been changed. No, this has been changed. Well, a lot of them use things like this and say, okay, this file has changed from here to here, or it hasn't changed, or then they have entire libraries, and they can even, some of them even have these really cool things where they'll even track down, and it looks like this. They have if you have any like advanced forensics knowledge, they'll even like break them out into this like big tree and just show you how they think everything was altered. It's really fascinating to watch. Yeah, hash keys. Then QoS, or quality of service, is a set of network technologies used to guarantee its ability to dependably serve network resources and high priority applications to endpoints. A network administrator can assign the order in which packets are handled and the amount of bandwidth given to an application or traffic flow. This is called traffic shaping. Almost all firewalls today recognize QoS settings. In fact, all the ones that I've worked with have had that. Design technologies. Okay, network segmentation. And unless you have an incredibly small network, you will see this in practice. Examples of network segmentation include virtual LANs and demilitarized zones. Zero Trust is a strategic initiative about networks that is designed to prevent successful attacks. It attempts to eliminate the concept of trust from an organization's network architecture. Zero Trust requires that networks be segmented. A network can be segmented by separating devices into logical groups by creating virtual LANs or VLANs. VLANs can be isolated so that sensitive data is transported only to members of that VLAN. Then we have your DMZ, which separates the network located outside secure network perimeter. Untrusted outside users can access the DMZ but cannot enter the secure network. Common approach to configuring a DMZ is to use a jump box, sometimes called a jump server or jump host, which is a minimally configured administrator server that connects two dissimilar security zones while providing tightly restricted access between them. So here's your example of you have your router, your firewall, you got your DMZ over here, and then you have your other one on the right. And then this is with your jump box. So you have your firewall switch, your jump box, and then into your DMZ. Load balancing. This is a technology that can help to evenly distribute work across network and can allocate requests among multiple devices. Advantages of load balancing technology is to reduce probability of overloading a single server, optimizes bandwidth of network computers. Load balancing is achieved through software and hardware devices, or load balancer. Different scheduling protocols used in load balancers are round robin and affinity. In fact, I don't think I've worked on a network, even the small ones, which don't have a load balancer in them. Now, they're just very common now. When multiple load balancers are used together, they can be placed in different configurations that include an inactive passive configuration. The primary load balancer distributes network traffic to the most suitable server, while the secondary load balancer operates in a listening mode. In an active-active configuration, all the load balancers are always active. The last one I worked with was an active-passive configuration. Load balancing can also support session persistence, which is a process in which a load balancer creates a link between an endpoint and a specific network server for the duration of the session. This can help improve the user experience and optimize network resource usage. Security advantage of using a load balancer: they can detect and stop attacks directed at a server or application. So you know how we've talked about the DDoS? These are great for seeing those coming, because you're already out there trying to balance your traffic. And so you're out there doing that, and then you see this huge influx of traffic. You can shut it down a lot faster because you've already got an appliance out there or software that sees this as it's happening. You can detect and prevent protocol attacks. Some load balancers can hide HTTP error pages or remove server identification headers from HTTP responses, denying attackers additional information about their internal network. Okay, knowledge check 2. What type of access technology routes some traffic over a secure VPN while other traffic accesses the internet directly without going through the VPN? Is that a split tunnel, site-to-site VPN, router, ACL, or a full tunnel? Looks like you guys are all in. Good job. All right, so that is it for the lecture. This one was a short one. Now, we have an option. I figure because we're coming off into holiday, I think I know what you guys are going to want to do. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.